Okay, I want to talk a little bit about effects. So I'm going to add, of course, a couple of details in there, review things. So what I have so far, I'm kind of taking this off of the Ellie Goulding track Lights, and I went to a tutorial and I saw that basically that opening lead melody part is is not that many notes as that you hear. So, and it may not be 100% right at this point, but it sounds a little something like this. And I'm willing to say that that's probably not 100% accurate. And a couple points. I put it in with a piano sound because I want to make this point very clear that these MIDI notes do not care what instrument they're triggering. MIDI notes and the instrument sound are completely separate from each other in that a MIDI note simply says play G sharp in the second octave at the same time as playing B in the third octave for 16th notes, etc. Okay, so first thing is I don't want it to be a piano. I want it to be some kind of a lead sound. And I did go ahead and see that, actually I already forgot what I liked. Maybe it's this one. Okay, so I do like that. Now, notice that echoey sound that sounds almost as though it's being played in a gym. Expand has two built-in effects called FX1 and FX2. And there's a power for each one. You can turn it on. You can click on the particular effect and change it. And I don't want to get too far into this because I want to talk about effects more generally speaking. So I'm going to turn this off. And then I'm left with a very dry, and that's what the term that we use in audio production to refer to a sound that has no additional effects, which we would describe as being wet. Dry refers to a sound that has no effects. So again, I'm going to turn this on so you can hear the difference. Okay, I actually like it. And that's the dry sound. It does have chorusing and delays and things like that. But we're just going to dry it out. And we're going to come over to where expand is inserted. Okay, remember these are called the inserts. You have 5 of them. You have an additional 5 available. If you ever fill them out, you can come to inserts F through J, add that column. But for cleanliness, until you need it, you don't need it. So underneath expand, I'm going to click again, and I'm going to plug in a delay. Now we do have fairly limited, actually I'm going to plug in a reverb. We have limited effects available in Pro Tools first. But once we understand a couple of them, then we can start to play with them in expand and whatnot. And in expand, they have them built into some of the presets. And I often will turn them off so that I have more control. You'll see as soon as I put in this reverb that there are far more controls, parameters. A parameter being, an element that you can change or control, a setting. Many more settings available on these plugins than the built-in effects on Expand. So right out of the gate, I'm going to play what this sounds like. To me, it sounds really far deep in that gym. Now, there's a couple parameters always to consider. Decay. How long is that echoey type sound going to go on for? That's probably the most important thing to consider. If I make this 10 seconds, that resonance, that it's not an echo as in repeating. I'm going to get into that in a second. This is kind of more the sound of, yelling in the gym to your friends and kind of listening to that decay. And that's what that term means, how long that sound takes to disappear. Then notice that you have a dry and a wet. As I mentioned, dry would be no effect. And 100% wet means that this sound is going through this machine and it's coming out 100% processed. What I like to do is actually kind of put that in the middle somewhere, maybe even more, so I hear more of the original sound, the clean, dry sound, but I have a little bit of the wetness. 12.5 seconds is far too long for this sound. I'm going to put it more like at 3-ish, maybe a little bit more. It really depends on the song and the vibe that you're trying to create. Now, there are all kinds of other settings here. And these are essentially digital configurations or emulations. They emulate what it sounds like to be in a large concert hall, in a church, using a metal plate that gets reverberation, or a small room, medium, small, large, which really affects the decay and the pre-delay. I'm only going to talk about decay here. And these rooms or these spaces have different characteristics to them. A hall might have wood walls and wood floors. A church, they often call them cathedrals, maybe cement or brick or those types of sounds that have different characteristics when sound bounces off those walls and those materials. I'm just going to keep it as a hall. I'm going to put it at about 3.5-ish seconds. A little shorter. Okay. It is feeling very long. Now, other types of effects. So reverb. This is called a reverb, and it reverberates when a sound bounces off of a wall, on a ceiling, across a room. This is what you get. And really the goal of reverb is to make a band, at least in my day, a band sound like they were somewhere bigger than they really were. When you're recording in the studio, you record very cleanly, and you add those effects later to have control over the sound that you're creating. Underneath this reverb, I'm going to plug in a different effect. This is called a delay. And a delay, you can either choose mono or stereo, mono to stereo, which would give us kind of a difference between left and right. Let's do that. Let's see what happens. You get two sides, basically. A delay is an echo, so that when you say hello, you're going to hear hello, 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 that slowly go away as well. That effect, or that parameter of how many times are you going to hear that repeat, is called feedback. On this particular unit, it's called FBK. I'm going to raise that to about 25%. And I say about, I'm not 100% sure. You can turn synchronization on. If it's synced, it is listening or paying attention to the tempo of your song, and therefore you can choose note values to set your delay time to. And what delay time means is that how much time is in between each repetition of that sound. So I'm going to link these left and right so that they're all the same essentially. So when I change this back, it should be 500 each. Okay, now this is kind of weird because the wet dry, when it's 100% wet on a delay, you actually don't hear that first hit, because all you hear is the affected or the delayed sound. So literally, you don't hear this dry original note. You hear it 500 milliseconds later. So I'm going to bring down this wet to about 50, just so we can see if that makes much of a difference. Okay, you can hear it. And you can also hear ding, ding, ding. Now, the feedback, if I raise that, say, to 50, it just means that those extra hits, those delays, are going to play longer. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, so just listening again to what we started with, I can turn these off. Let's put some reverb on it. Now that I'm hearing this, I feel it's too much. Let's open up the delay. And the delay has too much feedback on it. But again, these are things that you play with as you build your tracks, as you mix them. Okay, so plugin effects. This is how you do it. In Pro Tools, this is called serial, meaning that these literally go in the order in which you put them. Reverb, the sound of yelling in a big space, a band being in a concert hall, or, you know, I went to Spain last year for Christmas, and we were in a beautiful cathedral in Barcelona, and there was a choir, and there were no microphones and no effects, but it sounded lush and wet and beautiful. It was this huge stone cathedral. And then the delay that gives us actual repetitions. And you can choose these note values, you know, triplets, dotted, you know, and get really interesting rhythmic patterns. Let's see. And there are also presets in here. So if you choose something, let's do something that goes, is there a ping pong? Ping pongs are fun. Stereo. No ping pong. Ping. Okay, this is kind of cool because you have the left at 250 milliseconds and the right at 500. So you're hearing those at different times. And this one, the feedback is off, 0. So if I bring that up, you can hear that delay go back and forth. All right, so basics of effects.